You know the story. A shy sea maiden falls for a human prince, trades her voice for legs, endures unbearable pain with every step, and disappears into froth when love fails her. But the version most people think they know, pink tail, silver comb, a tidy happy ending, is a modern laundry list of comforts. The truth is far darker. Hans Christian Andersen's original is not a children's consolation prize. It's a surgical map of sacrifice, silence, and social violence. If you keep the sanitized cartoon in your head, you will miss what Andersen really wrote into the margins of 1837 Denmark. A ledger of bodies bartered, souls denied, and a culture that turns female surrender into spectacle. Picture Copenhagen in the winter of 1836. Candles gutter in a narrow garret. The wind off the harbor smells of tar and boiled herring. Hans Christian Andersen, age 31, sits hunched with a quill. The original manuscript, now held in the Royal Danish Library, Copenhagen, shows his hand changing phrasing, refining the mermaid's impossible bargain. He publishes Den lille havfru in 1837. But the pages track more than a fairy tale. They track a man riding through his own bruises. Letters to Edvard Collin from 1834, preserved and well catalogued, show Andersen's public devotion and private humiliation. He confesses a consuming love to Edvard Collin on dates that read like an index of longing. October 1834, November 1834. Collin, scion of Copenhagen's elite and the son of Andersen's patron Jonas Collin, replies with kindness but refuses the intimacy Andersen seeks. This rejection sits like salt in a wound and explains why the prince in the tale is less a romantic hero and more a symbol of social exclusion. First revelation, the exchange of voice for legs. Children hear a trade. Historians smell coercion. Giving up speech in 19th century Europe is not metaphor. It is the erasure of legal agency that women actually faced. Picture Copenhagen's town courts in the 1830s, where unnamed women appear in files, unable to testify without male guardians. In a Denmark still governed by patrimony and paternal authority, a woman's silence is enforced by law and custom. Andersen knows this. The manuscript revisions emphasize the bodily sensation, a sharp pain like walking on knives, he writes, making the loss of voice an embodied punishment. But it gets darker. This is not a voluntary metamorphosis, so much as a ritualized mutilation, required by a world that will only tolerate a woman if she pays in flesh. Second revelation, the knife and the ultimatum. In Andersen's tale, the little mermaid receives a dagger. If she kills the prince and lets his blood touch her feet, she will regain her tail and her soul. It reads like a moral puzzle in a children's book, but historically, it maps onto real acts of coercion and betrayal. Think of European history's grim ledger, informers and spies who were forced to betray loved ones in exchange for leniency. In the ice, Napoleonic and post-Napoleonic decades, courts in Copenhagen and across Europe issued pardons in exchange for testimony, people coerced into ruinous choices. The dagger is not magical. It is the language of enforced choice. Andersen writes the mermaid refusing the slaying. That refusal is not heroic in a comfy modern sense. It is a condemnation. She chooses non-violence and is punished for ethical consistency. Here's what's truly horrifying. The tale tells you that moral purity does not protect you. It tells you that refusing to commit violence may mean erasure. Third revelation, the prince's indifference. Children see romantic betrayal. Historians see social immobility. The prince marries a human princess and never suspects the mermaid's compassion. If you read contemporary newspapers and pamphlets, the obsession with high-status unions is constant. In 1838, the nation celebrated Grace Darling in England. Her daring sea rescue of survivors from the wreck of the SS Forfarshire made headlines on September 7, 1838, because maritime heroics still served class narratives. A working-class heroine was exceptional. Marriage and status remained carefully policed. Andersen places his mermaid outside that choreography of rank. Her yearning to enter that world, literally to become human, underscores an economic fact. The only way to change social fate is to abandon your body and your voice. The prince's marriage is not merely personal cruelty, it is social enforcement. Fourth revelation: commodification of the drowned woman. After the mermaid dissolves into sea foam, Andersen gives her a strange fate. She becomes a daughter of the air, condemned to perform good deeds for 300 years to win a soul. The Victorian age turned drowned, saintly, or liminal women into public fascination. In 1842, P.T. Barnum advertises and displays the so-called Fiji mermaid in New York, a grotesque stitched artifact promoted as exotic spectacle. Barnum's advertisement in the New York Herald exemplifies how bodies, real or fabricated, are made into raw entertainment. The mermaid's dissolution into foam and subsequent merchandising as a moral lesson is not merely poetic. It mirrors how 19th century culture commercializes female suffering for moral instruction. Historical records show this turning of human tragedy into a didactic exhibit again and again. But the horror does not stop there. Andersen's original offers a system, not an isolated trauma. The mermaid's lack of a soul until she performs good deeds for centuries is theological control. Church doctrines in 19th century Denmark, recorded in parish books and catechisms, insisted on a very narrow road to salvation. Souls are not given to those outside normative marriage structures. Church records from Danish parishes of the era show meticulous tracking of baptisms, confirmations, legitimacy of birth, mechanisms that made salvation into a bureaucratic gatekeeping process. The mermaid's penance is an extreme condensation of that file cabinet thinking, virtue measured, tallied, and assessed like accounts in a ledger. Reconstruct a second scene. Imagine the palace ballroom, spring 1837. Chandeliers faint, the scent of rosewater and candle wax heavy in the air. The prince, in a uniform trimmed with gold, laughs with ministers. A new bride, her corset tight, perfume masking the cheap dye in her hair, accepts the crown with that practiced smile. The little mermaid watches from the shore, salt on her lips, feet bleeding from each step because Andersen insists on the physical cost. The crowd cannot hear her. No one records her sacrifice. These threads, silence as legal erasure, the dagger as coercive ultimatum, marriage as status lock, commodification of female suffering, the church's ledger-like control, are not isolated metaphors. They point to a systematic constellation of power in 19th century Europe that turns female bodies into currency. Court files, parish registries, Barnum's advertisements, Andersen's own letters, and manuscripts are the archival fingerprints. So the next time you hum the tune or watch the bright cartoon, you will see the foam differently. This is not a quaint cautionary tale. It is a document of social violence dressed as myth. Andersen writes pain into the body, law into the bargain, and market logic into the aftermath. He gives you a mermaid who refuses to murder for a soul and is erased anyway. That refusal is not romantic. It is damning, and then recorded in histories that let the world off the moral hook. Once you read the 1837 text against the letters from 1834, against the Royal Danish Library's inked margins, against the 1842 ads hawking grotesque mermaids, and the parish ledgers that catalogued human worth, you cannot unsee the ledger. The fairy tale stops being a bedtime story and becomes a mirror held up to a society that required sacrifice and then commodified the sacrifice. The Little Mermaid, in Andersen's hand, is not a lesson in love. She is evidence. You will never look at the foam the same way again.